Today on Mother Mayhem. Instead of gratitude, what you got was suspicion, criticism, rejection. Why? Because your presence, your being there, your doing that act of love, well, it disrupted the narrative that she had built. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast for Daughters. I'm your host, Heather Gray, and today's episode features a conversation I have been wanting to have with all of you for some time. I'm really grateful to today's letter writer, Elizabeth, for sharing her story. I'll introduce her to all of you in just a second, but I want to offer some context first. In her letter, Elizabeth tells us that her mom isn't narcissistic. While some of her mom's behaviors may seem familiar to those of you listening, they don't check every box. Elizabeth's childhood was mostly free from significant trauma, and aside from a few incidences, her needs were actually largely met. However, in the past year, Elizabeth has begun to see more of her mom's struggles come to light. Her mom's behavior doesn't align neatly with the typical traits of narcissism, but does fit into a broader category of emotional limitations. Elizabeth's mom seems to lack emotional maturity, for lack of a better word or descriptor. She struggles with emotional regulation, and she has difficulty maintaining healthy, consistent connections with other people. She tends to do better when there's some conflict present, but beyond that, it is hard to pinpoint what might exactly be going on. I don't want to spoil too much of Elizabeth's story, but I do want to acknowledge something important here. Many of you listening will relate to Elizabeth's experience of feeling uncertain about whether or not she belongs in this community. And I'm here to tell you that she does belong. Her story, though it doesn't involve a fully narcissistic mother, mirrors a lot of your own experiences. Those of you who feel your mom's limitations and those of you who may not have experienced outright narcissism, but still feel deeply affected by the emotional environment your mom created. This is something I have wanted for the podcast all along. A space for those who've been impacted by emotionally limited mothers, even if their mothers aren't classic narcissists. The term narcissistic mother was helpful for organizing conversations, making the show more discoverable, but I've also come to see that it's leaving some of you out. Finding information about daughters of emotionally limited mothers can be hard. Often it's not well researched, or it can become a space for venting without a lot of direction or clinical insight. And as I continue exploring this conversation, I realize that there's room for both types of experiences. In building Mayhem Daughters, our private online community, I made the choice to include daughters of both narcissistic and emotionally limited moms because it felt like a more inclusive space. It's a community for you, daughters who listen to this podcast and feel like the topics we discuss resonate with your experiences. And as I move forward with the podcast, I'm thinking about how to better include the daughters of emotionally limited mothers in a more explicit and direct way, while also still honoring the stories of those with narcissistic moms. My hope is that for daughters like Elizabeth, you will feel like you belong here too, and that your experience matters. And at the same time, I want to be clear that this space is always going to honor the unique struggles of daughters of narcissistic mothers. I know how sensitive we can all be to change around here, and I want you to know that while I am opening our doors wider, this is always going to be a place where your voice is heard, your truth is respected, and your journey remains central. While your mothers did and said different things at different inflection points and with varying degrees of intensity and duration, at the end of the day, daughters who find this show are united by the impact of their mother wounds. That is what you all have in common, and it is my greatest privilege to shine a light on your experience, guide you on a path towards healing, and bring you together in support as you walk this path together. And now I can introduce you to Elizabeth. And in all honesty, Elizabeth, it took me a good chunk of time to choose your name, sister. I was compelled by how lost you feel, how undone, and how much you need answers. And I wanted a name that communicated that and would also allow you to feel seen. So I've named you Elizabeth after Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love. Now, Mayhem loyalists, you ladies have my permission to call me out if I have used this one before. I imagine I have, but alas, I am working on taking a little bit less time choosing your names. Seriously, you all. I go down rabbit holes you can't even imagine trying to give you all the most perfect name. So, Elizabeth, here's your story. I'm going to find you on the other side. Heather, I'm writing to you from a positively desperate place. I feel so lost, lonely, disconnected, and I feel so utterly alone. I don't get what's happening to me, and I don't understand what's going on. I have been in a place of deep struggle for about 6 weeks now. My best friend went looking for help and found your podcast, and truly, it is the only thing that has helped me. I feel understood and seen, but also, even in this incredible space you've built, I don't think I belong. I'm driftless, wondering if I belong anywhere, and I really need your help. I'm hoping you'll be able to help me, even though I'm not one of your typical daughters. My mom isn't narcissistic, Heather, and I really wish she was, because then I could belong here with all of you, but she's not. I'm a Midwesterner, and I grew up with parents and my older sister. I never thought of myself as having had a bad childhood, but now as I unravel what's been hurting me, I guess I'm looking at some of it differently. Here's what I think starts to tell the story. My dad divorced my mom when I was a freshman in college, about 7 years ago. He came to school to tell me personally and said that he loved me and my sister, and really just said that loving my mom became too hard. That he stayed for my sister and I so that we could be raised in a 2-parent home, but that in his older years he wanted more love in his life, someone who was easier to love. Heather, if my childhood was so normal and uneventful, I think that should have surprised me when my dad said that, but it didn't. I remember nodding and saying, yes, she can be hard to get along with sometimes. My mom doesn't have a lot of friends and had been in conflict with her own family since I was in the 5th grade. I remember vaguely a fight she and my dad got into about his brother. His brother was especially well off and wanted to host our family on a European vacation when we were in high school. My dad wanted to do it, but my mom said no and said she wouldn't stand by him choosing his brother over her. I remember tension she got into with others, but there weren't many tense moments between us. I always felt loved and seen by her. I could go to her for advice and support, and I could really feel it. My sister and I have always been close. We don't really remember a time when she tried to split us, but she did create a scene when my sister was in college and invited just me to visit her for a weekend. She had thought a girls' weekend with all 3 of us would have been better. She let us know her displeasure, but didn't make a scene. I can also now point to a time in high school. I had the lead in the play, and on opening night, she said she was deeply disappointed in me for not going out to celebrate with family that night and instead hanging out with the cast and crew. She asked me to remember who brought her to all the play practices, but that just felt like my mom being a mom, not getting that everyone who had done the play would want to hang out together. That's all my memory has, really, these odd moments of disconnect, like where did that come from? But I never felt dysregulated in childhood. I never felt emotionally unsafe. I didn't have to scan for what kind of mood she was in, and I didn't have to worry about displeasing her every day. I don't think of myself as surviving any kind of childhood trauma like your other daughters experience. Until recently, I might have even said that my relationship with my mom was solid. And now that I'm hearing the stories on your show, I might have said I took a lot for granted. And then this past year happened. I'm in grad school for art conservation and was in the process of getting an internship with either the Smithsonian in DC or MoMA in New York. My mom got diagnosed with breast cancer, and without my dad, I was worried she wouldn't have anyone supporting her. My sister has 9-month-old twins, one who is medically fragile, and so I decided to take a semester off to care for my mom. It wasn't an aggressive form of cancer. Treatment wasn't going to be as intense as it can be for some, and doctors were never worried that she would die from it, but cancer is cancer, so I moved back home. It was in that time that I experienced the unraveling. My mom made these comments that I had bailed on school, had wondered if I was afraid to enter the big leagues of the big name museums, and implied that I was hiding at home. When I mentioned being there for her, she would just brush it off. She started picking fights with me, started picking at me, and initially I chalked it up to the cancer treatment. My dad had been concerned about my choice to go home for her, and he and I made a standing weekly dinner date. And it was in those dinners that he would share that my experience with her felt familiar to him, that he often felt pushed away by her, felt like he wasn't enough. He felt like she was all or nothing. They were either deeply in love and their love was the envy of all the other couples, or he was neglecting her and not caring about her. He shared that she often questioned his love for him and said that it was the constant questioning of his love that actually made him stop loving her. He was also turned off by her love of conflict in her family and shared that many had tried to reach out over the years to connect, and she had rebuffed them, always finding new reasons that they were unacceptable or not enough to her. That was my exact experience with her when I was home caring for her. She was just at me, on me, nagging me. It felt like the walls were closing in, like I wasn't seeing what I was seeing. We'd have this awesome night rewatching the movies we loved when I was a kid, and I would go to bed feeling warm and squishy, and suddenly the next morning I would feel a chill in the air. Or a nurse commented on my being there for my mom, and she said, "Oh, my daughter's just hiding from her life for a while." My mom's treatment wrapped up before Christmas. So I spent the holidays with her, my sister, and her family, and I also got to see my dad. The holidays were good, fine, uneventful. And as I was moving out to head back to school for winter semester, my mom just lost it on me. Accused me of being glad to be leaving her, of using her cancer as an excuse to avoid my life. And then, Heather, she said I didn't really love her, that I was pretending. I don't need to belabor the internships that I let go of to support her, but Heather, those are a big deal in the art community, and I don't know if I'll have the same options when I go back to school. But I gave them up for her without thinking, without blinking, because she was my mom. And suddenly she thinks I don't love her. She sent me away with "have a nice life," and I just drove away. She blew up my phone while I ignored her and drove. Her text messages and voicemails went on and on about how she couldn't believe I drove away when she was clearly still wanting to talk, and that it just proves what kind of daughter I am, and that it is time she had some boundaries of her own, and that a daughter driving away when her mother is so upset is proof positive that I don't know what real love is, that she has to have boundaries, that it's about time she stood up for herself and stopped people pleasing and being the dutiful mother. Jesus Christ, Elizabeth. Me driving away was a line that shouldn't have been crossed. She was violated by it. Violated, Heather. She said she was violated, even though she was screaming at me to have a nice life. Oh, Elizabeth, I'm just sitting in this with you for a second. God, I'm so sorry. This must have just been so awful. I'm unglued, Heather. I can't believe this happened. That my mom said those things to me. That she thinks those things of me. I don't love her. My love isn't real? How did I give up my life for someone who thinks this of me? And was she this person all along and I just didn't see it? My dad and my sister are helping me see that my mom often made my sister and I the exception to the rule. She was never close to anyone outside of our family, struggled with being close to my dad, and somehow functioned for a while for my sister and I. I'm so hurt that my mom thinks these things of me. I didn't leave school for the accolades, but I did do it as an act of love. And now she's rejecting that notion that I love her. I've never been disrespectful or fought with her. And yes, I froze when she was in her storm and I didn't know what to do. So, yes, I drove away. But her response feels so incredibly mean and harsh. I'm really, really sad. I can't believe she thinks these things of me, her daughter, and I guess now I wonder if the love I thought she had for me all along was even real either. I need help, Heather. Is this how it happens? Little things here and there, and then suddenly an all out war? How does this happen? I'm so sad and heartbroken. I'm really looking forward to any insight and direction you have. I just don't know what to do, how to feel, how to be, or what to even do with myself. Thanks. Oh, Elizabeth. Okay, sister. If anything, the thing I want you to hear right away, right absolutely fucking away, is you belong here. You are a Mayhem daughter. I promise you that. Everything you are sitting in, everything you are feeling is so familiar to so many other daughters who are listening along with us right now. They too know exactly what it is like to show up with the best of intentions, only to be questioned for it. They too have had their love doubted, minimized, and have felt like they aren't enough or that they're not doing enough. One thing I've said before on this show about narcissism is that narcissists aren't just narcissists with their daughters or within their own families. They are narcissists with everyone. It just looks different depending on the role they're playing because every role they choose is designed to get a certain reaction. These patterns of behavior aren't ever random, they're strategies, and they use them in every relationship. And when I started this show, I talked about how narcissists just can't do relationships, that's what it means to have a personality disorder. They lack the skills for healthy connection and they can't develop them. Now, personality disorders get diagnosed in a real psychobabble way that I don't think I need to get into here for the sake of the conversation, but let me just say this. It is possible for someone to have traits or tendencies of a personality disorder without meeting the full criteria for a diagnosis. And Elizabeth, I think that's what's happening with you here. I think your mom might be showing traits or tendencies of what's called borderline personality disorder. The way your mom flips between extremes, the warmth, the rage, the way she pulls you in just to push you away, this isn't just difficult for you, it's a pattern. And it sometimes becomes predictable, but it is always painful. Borderline personality disorder, or you might hear it called BPD, is a condition where a person struggles with emotional regulation. It leads to these intense mood swings that you've been observing. It comes alongside a fear of abandonment and unstable relationships, which is probably why your mom wigged out when you were packing up the car. People with borderline personality disorder or borderline tendencies, they tend to see things and people in extremes. So people to them become all good or all bad. So it's about love or betrayal, devotion or rejection. And their emotions can be really overwhelming, not just for them, but for everyone who ends up being around them. And when they feel hurt, and that hurt is either real or imagined, they react in ways that feel manipulative, punishing, or desperate to regain control. You said that she tells you that she loves you one day and then accuses you of being against her the next, that she twists your attempts at kindness into proof that you're hurting her, that she says she just can't take it anymore, as if your existence, your efforts to have a relationship with her are some unbearable burden. That push pull, that emotional whiplash, the way everything is always about her feelings, her suffering, her perception of things. It's not about who you are or what you're actually doing. It's about how she's experiencing you and how that experience shifts depending on what she might need in the moment. That's why I'm starting to think here that she has those traits of BPD. The intensity of emotion, that black and white thinking, the way she makes you responsible for her pain. These are patterns that I see in so many daughter stories. It doesn't make her evil per se, and it also might not even mean that she isn't suffering, but it does mean that the relationship you have with her is always probably going to feel unstable because she herself is showing that she's emotionally unstable. And Elizabeth, I need you to hear me on this. This isn't because of you. It's not because you showed up at the house to take care of her. It was never because of you. Now, does any of this mean that your mom has full-blown borderline personality disorder? Maybe not. Personality disorders, like I said earlier, they can exist on a spectrum, and formal diagnosis usually requires a certain number of symptoms present over a certain amount of time. That's that psychobabble part I was referencing earlier. But that doesn't mean that the traits, the behaviors, and the tendencies she seems to be having aren't going to still impact you. Some people don't meet that full criteria for a diagnosis, but they do still struggle with those traits and those tendencies of those disorders, especially when they're emotionally unequipped to manage their feelings in a healthy way. When someone doesn't have the tools to regulate their emotions, they're going to act out their feelings instead of processing them. So many daughters listening to the show have been in that moment with their moms acting out their feelings instead of processing them. Your moms lash out, they punish, they twist reality to fit the story that they need to believe in any given moment. So, Elizabeth, for your mom, it sounds like it plays out in that black and white thinking. One minute she loves you, the next she sees you as the villain, right? It shows up in what you're experiencing as her emotional volatility, in the way that she makes you responsible for her feelings, and in the threats or the guilt she uses to keep you engaged. These aren't random behaviors. They're part of that pattern you've seen that your dad is starting to highlight for you that points to that emotional instability and her own struggle to self regulate. And Elizabeth, when someone moves through the world in this way, they don't just struggle in that one relationship. These patterns are going to show up everywhere at work, in friendships, in romantic relationships. And I want to walk you through how I think this might have happened. In her mind, your mom was the one who had been abandoned. She had pushed people away, cut people off, as your dad told you. But instead of seeing that as her own doing, she likely started to frame herself as the victim, left alone, mistreated, unappreciated. And then you showed up. You did what a loving daughter does. You dropped everything. You rearranged your life. You stepped in when she needed you most. But instead of gratitude, what you got was suspicion, criticism, rejection. Why? Because your presence, your being there, your doing that act of love, well, it disrupted the narrative that she had built. If she truly had no one, if she had been discarded and abandoned, how was she going to explain you, your care, your sacrifice? It forced her to face that contradiction in herself. And rather than sit with the discomfort, she did what emotionally immature people tend to do. She lashed out. she twisted reality, and she made you the problem. Your love didn't soothe her, it threatened her. Your help didn't soften her, it exposed her. And when people like your mom feel exposed, they react. And they never do it with reflection, but they tend to do it with defensiveness, with blame, and emotional chaos. That is why it felt like no matter what you did, it was never going to be right. She wasn't looking for love or support. She was looking for control, for someone to carry the weight of her feelings so that she wouldn't have to. And when you refused to be that container, when you simply loved her without giving her the reaction she wanted, that's what I think tended to send her spiraling. And now her spiral has you spiraling because of course it does. How could it not? Of course, Elizabeth, this has been incredibly, incredibly disorienting and not to mention painful. Of course it has been. You stepped up in the biggest way. By the way, congratulations on those museums. I hope you get them back. You sacrificed, you showed up, you gave what you had, and instead of being met with warmth or even basic human decency for that matter, you found yourself facing her rejection and her suspicion. And of course, that's devastating, Elizabeth. That is the kind of pain that does make you question everything: who you are, what love even means, if you somehow did something wrong without realizing it. I really need you to hear me when I say this. You did nothing wrong. You were a daughter loving her mom. You were a daughter who saw that your mom didn't have many people to help see her through cancer, so you stepped up. And somehow now you are left holding the wreckage of something that you never even broke. That confusion, the grief, the exhaustion. You, sister, have been running in circles, trying to make sense of something that is never going to make sense because it simply isn't logical. And it is so unfair, so deeply unfair. And I know you're tired. I know you feel lost in all of this, questioning probably whether or not you've imagined parts of it, whether or not you're overreacting, whether or not you should have done anything differently. I need to bring you back to the truth. You are not crazy. The love you gave your mom was real, and you are not responsible for how your mom responds to your love. You deserved better, and you still do. Right now, let's focus on helping you find your center while you are holding all of this pain. Because right now, you're flooding. Your emotions are crashing over you in waves. They're overwhelming you, and they're relentless. You're trying to make sense of what happened because somewhere inside you have this belief that if you can just understand it, if you could put all the pieces together, the flood will stop. That's why I started by helping you make sense of what I think happened with your mom. So you can begin to organize it, to see it for what it is instead of letting it twist itself into something about you. But understanding what made your mom do what she did and actually managing the feelings she left you with. Well, Elizabeth, those are two different things. Right now, your nervous system, it is on high alert. Your mind right now is cycling through every moment, every interaction, trying to find solid ground. That's trauma brain. It searches for logic in the illogical. It tries to solve pain like it's a puzzle, when really it just needs to be felt and moved through. So that is where we go next. How you can steady yourself inside all of this. How you can bring your focus back to you when everything in you wants to keep reaching for answers that aren't going to exist. The first thing I need you to do, Elizabeth, is breathe. And I know that sounds really trite and really simple, and I don't mean it to be. But right now, your body needs signals that it's safe. When you're in this kind of emotional flood, your nervous system is always bracing for impact, as if you're in danger. We have to interrupt that. Take a deep breath in, slow and steady, and hold it for a moment. And then exhale for longer than you inhaled. And I encourage you and everyone listening while you're at it, why the heck not? Do that for a few times. Now, I want you to remember that just because these feelings are big, it doesn't mean that they're dangerous. They feel like they might take you under, but you are not going to drown in this. You are still here. You are still breathing. And as you move through this, I want you to anchor yourself in the present. Your brain is going to want to keep spinning back into the past, replaying the moments, trying to rewrite what's already happened. And it's going to want to project into the future, running those worst case scenarios, wondering what this all means for you now. But where you have power, where you can take care of yourself, is right here. So when you feel yourself spiraling, I want you to physically ground yourself. Put your feet flat on the floor. Press your palms against something solid, a table, your legs, your heart. Look around the room and name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This helps pull you out of that flood and back into the safety of the present moment. And then I really hope you will give yourself some permission to rest. Emotional pain is exhausting. It takes so much out of all of you, and you don't have to push through any of this at full speed. If you need to wrap yourself up in a blanket and watch a show that feels familiar and safe, I really want you to do that. If you need to go for a walk, move your body, let the energy out, I want you to do that too. If you need to write it all out, every single unfiltered thought, so it has somewhere to go other than circling inside your head, go ahead. By all means, Elizabeth, please do that. Most of all, be gentle with yourself. You are not failing because this is hurting you. You aren't weak because this is hard. You're moving through something that is really painful, something that is incredibly disorienting and incredibly, deeply, profoundly unfair. Of course, it feels exactly like this. Of course it does. But you will find your footing. You are going to come through this. And until that feels true, I am going to hold that belief for you. Right now, I know you want an answer, and I imagine that you might be feeling desperate for a plan, something solid to hold on to so you don't feel like you're just floating in the aftermath of this. And I get that. When everything feels this raw, it is natural to want to move quickly, to do something, to say something, to take control of the situation in whatever way you can. But before you make any decisions, I want you to step back, breathe, get yourself to a place where you feel steady, even if just for a moment. Because the truth is, you can't unring this spell. Your mom has shown you who she is and what her limitations are. And I know that's excruciating. I know you wish there was something you could say, some perfect combination of words that would make her understand, make her see what she's done, make her be the mother you thought her to be and want her to be again. But she is who she is. And now that you see that clearly, the question isn't, how do I fix this? Because it isn't yours to fix. The question is, given this reality, what do I want? So let's think through that together. If you take your mother exactly as she is, not as you hope she might become, not as she promises she'll be, but exactly as she has shown herself to be, what kind of relationship do you want to have with her? Not what she wants, not what she expects, what you want. Do you want regular contact, knowing that that means navigating these same cycles? Or would it bring you more peace to take a step back? What boundaries do you need in order to protect yourself emotionally? What are you willing to tolerate? And what are you done tolerating? These are your choices to make, not hers. You don't have to default to whatever she decides this relationship should look like. You get to decide what serves you. And that decision doesn't have to happen today. It doesn't have to happen while you're still in the thick of this pain. Give yourself some time. Give yourself some space. Let yourself sit with the truth of what you now know. And when you're ready, when you're more centered, you will make the choice that is right for you. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of self-respect and clarity. I promise you that choice is yours. And whatever you decide, you are not wrong for making it. I also promise you that you are not alone in this. I want to remind you, Elizabeth, and all of you daughters, that you are not alone in this. None of you are. I started Mayhem a year and a half ago, and what it's becoming now is so much more than just a podcast. It's a place of support, a community of daughters who connect through this show and then have the ability to connect with each other. Daughters who listen to this podcast and then gather every week for Tuesday group where they share their hurts, what's on their mind, where they exchange support. It's a therapy group, and as you're considering whether or not that's something for you, I want you to think of it as a space where you can be seen and heard, where you don't have to carry everything alone. And now we also have Mayhem Daughters, an online community just for daughters that's off social media. It's a place where you can walk this path of healing with others who are automatically going to get it. You can meet with one another, message one another, gain support, and give support. Because this work, as we've heard today so clearly, so powerfully, it hurts and it's really challenging. It affects so much of your life. That's why I'm really looking to build a community of support for all of you who are finding help, hope, and healing through this show. You don't have to go through this by yourselves. There are spaces, there are people, and there is a whole community of daughters who are here for you. All of you are in this community of women around the world who are in this together. And I, for sure, most definitely, am in it with you too. Bye for now. I do hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you have a question you'd like me to consider for the show, please do email me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. You are always welcome to share your story or questions by recording yourself using the voice app on your phone. For best recording quality, please do record directly into your phone without using headphones or Bluetooth speakers. We're building an incredible community as well over on Instagram, and I'd love to see you over there too. You can find us at Daughters NPD. Lastly, if you love what you've been hearing here on Mayhem and have found the show helpful in your own trauma recovery, please do consider becoming a Mother Mayhem sponsor by purchasing Simple Scripts for Saying Hard Things. It's a resource I created that provides the right words for the hard conversations, and it covers life, love, and work. You'll find a link for that in the show notes. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please do share the show with her. Your reviews and social shares help spread the word, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing the show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks so much for your time today. As always, I'm in it with you. Bye for now.